There is a moment most people in toxic relationships never see coming. It doesn't look like a fight. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like love or concern or correction or just the way things are between you. And by the time you realize what was actually happening, you are already deep inside it. Smaller than you used to be, quieter than you used to be, second-guessing yourself in ways you never did before. This video is about understanding how that happens. Not to make you angry, not to make you paranoid, but to give you something that toxic relationships systematically take away. Clarity, because you cannot heal from something you cannot name, and you cannot protect yourself from something you don't understand. Let's start with the truth that most people find hardest to accept. You were not controlled because you were naive. You were not manipulated because you were foolish. You were targeted, in part, because of the very things that make you a good person. Your consistency, your willingness to give the benefit of the doubt, your belief, deep and sincere, that if you loved well enough, things would improve. Those are not weaknesses. They are wounds that were turned into weapons. The philosopher Simone Weil wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. You gave your attention completely and without guard, because that is what love asked of you. What you were not taught is that not everyone who accepts your attention has earned it. Here is how it actually works, beneath the surface of what you experienced. Every toxic dynamic begins with a period of mirroring. The other person reflects back to you exactly what you most need to see. They are understanding, attentive, perceptive. They seem to get you in ways no one else has. This is not always calculated. Sometimes it is instinctive, a pattern developed in their own wounded history. But conscious or not, the effect is the same. You open, you trust, you invest. And then, slowly, the mirror shifts. Criticism appears, dressed as concern. Withdrawal appears, framed as disappointment. Your emotions become problems to manage. Your needs become burdens to apologize for. And because the shift is gradual, because each step is only slightly further than the last, your nervous system never gets the sudden alarm signal it would need to say, "This is wrong. Leave now." Instead, it adapts. It shrinks the definition of acceptable. It learns to call discomfort normal. This is not a failure of your intelligence. It is the predictable result of a very specific kind of conditioning, one that psychologists have documented extensively and that spiritual traditions have maimed for centuries. It is the slow theft of your inner compass. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But here is what toxic relationships do before you can access that strength. They colonize the mind itself. They install a voice, critical, doubting, diminishing. That sounds, after long enough, exactly like your own. This is why so many survivors of toxic relationships say the same thing. "I didn't even recognize myself by the end." That is not an accident. That is the deepest mechanism of control. Not force, but the slow replacement of your self-trust with their narrative about who you are. Let me tell you about someone. She was sharp, perceptive. The kind of person who could read a room in seconds and understand dynamics that others missed entirely. Inside the relationship, those gifts were systematically dismantled. When she named something that felt wrong, she was told she was too sensitive. When she trusted her instincts, she was called paranoid. When she expressed needs, she was made to feel she was too demanding. Over 2 years, she stopped naming things, stopped trusting her instincts, stopped expressing needs. She thought she was becoming more mature, more reasonable, more easy to be with. She was actually becoming easier to control. The day she left, her hands were shaking, not from fear of him, from the unfamiliar feeling of making a decision without his permission. That is what the systematic undermining of self-trust does. It doesn't cage you with bars. It makes you forget you were ever free. Understanding the mechanism is not about becoming hard. It is about becoming clear. There is a concept in psychology called the locus of control. People with an internal locus of control believe their lives are primarily shaped by their own choices and values. People with an external locus believe they are primarily shaped by what happens to them, by other people's moods, reactions, and judgments. Toxic relationships are, among other things, a sustained campaign to move your locus of control outward, to make you feel that your worth, your rightness, your reality itself is determined by someone else's assessment of you. Healing is the long, quiet work of moving it back inside, not through toughness, not through walls, but through the patient reclamation of your own perception as valid. Your feelings are data. Your discomfort is information. Your instincts, even when they were overridden, dismissed, and mocked, were almost always right. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. But I would add this: never sell your knowing. That quiet, persistent inner knowing that something is wrong, that is not a flaw to be corrected. That is your soul speaking. Learn to hear it again. Here is what genuine discernment looks like after a toxic relationship and how to build it. 1. Learn the difference between someone testing your limits and someone respecting them. Healthy people, when they encounter a boundary, adjust. They may ask questions, they may feel disappointed, but they adjust. People who erode boundaries argue with them, reframe them, make you feel guilty for having them, or simply ignore them and wait to see what you do. You do not have to be harsh to enforce a limit. You only have to be consistent. The response you receive will tell you everything. 2. Rebuild trust in your own perception. One small observation at a time. Start noticing again. When something feels off, don't immediately override that feeling. Instead, simply note it. Write it down if it helps. Over time, you will begin to see that your instincts have a pattern, and that pattern has been trying to protect you all along. 3. Distinguish between solitude and isolation. Toxic dynamics frequently involve cutting you off from other perspectives. Family, friends, anyone who might reflect reality back to you. Part of healing is deliberately reintroducing those voices. Not to be told what to do, but to remember that your experience matters to people who have nothing to gain from distorting it. 4. Practice the pause before the response. One of the lasting effects of toxic relationships is reactivity, either emotional flooding or complete shutdown. The healing practice is learning to sit for a moment in the space between what happens and how you respond. That space, small as it is where your agency lives. That space is where you begin to choose rather than just react. Here is the spiritual truth at the center of all of this. The mystic Thomas Merton wrote, "There is only one problem on which all my existence, my peace and my happiness depend, to discover myself in discovering God." For our purposes, we might put it this way: there is only one problem on which your healing depends, to discover yourself again. Not the self that was shaped by fear, not the self that learned to be palatable, not the self that made itself small to survive. The self that existed before the relationship taught you that being yourself was dangerous. That self is not lost. It has been waiting. It is in the moments when you catch yourself laughing without calculation, in the opinions you hold without immediately softening them, in the instincts that still rise, quietly, persistently, even after all this time. Your inner life was not destroyed. It was suppressed. And suppressed things, given even a little space, return. You are not starting from scratch. You are returning to yourself. And that return, slow, non-linear, sometimes painful, always worth it, is the most courageous thing a human being can do. If something in this video named what you've been living through, leave it in the comments. Not for performance, because naming it out loud is the first act of reclaiming it. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology and spirituality of healing, subscribe. The next step is already here. You were not broken by what happened to you. You were shaped by it. And now, finally, you get to decide what shape to become.